One, two. Yeah. Okay, so now that is Tangasa. Okay. There's YouTube. What display? I'm just waiting for it to pop in. So that's YouTube now. I just wanted to media quickly about item. Yara, why did they take the UWC stuff off? Okay, let me just HWU. HWU. Good of FM, Burnley, AGM, Nixie Reggae, PRS, Gonzo's Commercial, Manu Electrical, Desktop. Okay, I see it, I saw it now, just HWN, HNW, yeah, yes. Uh, um,
embracing sport, embracing leisure, embracing recreation, and so forth, where people leave behind all their troubles and challenges, but focus on the one thing. Because why? In the famous quote of Nelson Mandela, sport has the power to unite the country. It has a way of speaking to people in a language that no one doesn't understand, right? So if we look at that and we look at the concept of social cohesion, particularly from the white paper of sports and recreation in South Africa, there's an element of social cohesion and focusing on nation building as well to address the legacy of apartheid. However, if we look at all the efforts that has been done post the apartheid up until now, it is something that is quite evident that there's still inequalities that exist. Again, I made an example about the Cape Flats and other areas around the world as well. Like in Joburg, we've got Alex, we've got Santen, and all these other places as well. So there's evident inequalities that exist. And with that in mind, there's also the imbalances between how people enjoy their leisure time, their leisure spaces, recreation, and sporting activities where they can, engage in, mainly because of these inequalities. For example, if we take a drive down to Kwalanga, Kwanyanga, Kailich, and so forth, Constantia, and so forth, you'll see the difference in how the facilities are laid out, right? In the same way where you'd find a nice park that is, protected, well looked after, but if you go to townships, you won't find the same thing as well. So that is the inequalities that I'm speaking about. And with that also, it has an impact as well on how people with disabilities are included in those spaces. Because if a person that's using a wheelchair doesn't have access to a park, then what should they do? They're going to be at home resting, then they start developing bed sores, and then it becomes something that's chronic. But if the spaces are conducive for them to be out there with their friends and loved ones and be part of society, it's a different case. So the main thing here is that the significant barrier that is currently at play is that access to facilities and programs and infrastructure is always a challenge, particularly if you look at a person with disability. Because number one, either the facility does not cater for wheelchair. If it's a blind person, there's no walking rails for them. And if it's someone that is deaf, people don't know how to communicate with them, right? So all of those, they've got a lot of impact in how a person with disability interacts in a particular society. So I spoke about the definition of leisure, which refers to a behavior that leads to pleasure, amusement, and it enables motivation to continue a pursuit of a freely chosen activity. So I'll make an example. If, say, after your classes, right, you went to the student center and then you met up with a group of friends and then you started interacting with them, they introduced you to what I normally see is a game of dominoes. Then the more you learn about dominoes, the more intrigued you become about, playing the game. So the fact that you continue participating and making the time to go and participate, it's what leisure embraces. Because the more time you engage, the more at ease and at peace you are to also, benefit on other elements such as the social part of things, learning a new skill, learning about a new friend, their identity, and so forth. So if we look at the leisure spaces, and particularly in programs or in areas where leisure is being offered, there's normally a positive outcome on young people, right? We've got a lot of NGOs in our country where they advocate for young people to be kept busy. Instead of being out in the street, they try to get them occupied with positive activities, so it enhances a sense of independence. They gain responsibilities. There's hopefulness, there's positive identity, spirituality. The self-esteem also grows, and also the social skills. We live in a generation where most of the young people now, they're always on their phone. Social media is their new friend. People have lost. I read an interesting study where they say people no longer know how to be social because everyone is glued up to their phone. But if we look at how or the benefits of leisure, people can actually become more social. Because if I meet you somewhere, then we go and play a game of football. Then afterwards or throughout the activity itself, we're going to be talking, we're going to be, so there's that socialness also that comes into play as well. So if we look at also the leisure opportunities and experiences, they can contribute to a community's health. What do I mean by that? I'm sure you guys, you belong to a particular community where there's certain sporting codes that take place from time to time. What normally happens is the whole community will come in support of that particular event, and then at least for that time being, there's more positive engagement and less negative engagements, right? So leisure spaces and experiences, it promotes that as well. And also, there's a way that it has to reduce the negative outcomes. It's very seldom where you find crime happening in a sporting activity or in a leisure environment. Not saying it doesn't happen, but it's very rare. In a football game, rugby game, everyone is focused on the game. They're focusing on supporting their team. They're focusing on A, B, and C. So there's hardly any space where someone could think of doing anything malicious, except when one of the players gets tackled. So when we speak about leisure activities, this can include, but not limited to, playing online games. I know, especially as guys, there's a lot of PlayStation, and ladies, I know every time there's Candy Crush somewhere being played. So there's also stuff like dancing. Those that like to go on the outdoors, they engage in hiking. There's sports participation as well. Other people just enjoy the passive activities such as reading, bed watching, knitting, jogging. It all depends on an individual and your own preference as well, right? So what normally happens when we start seeing, I almost want to say, the negative side of society, the ills in society, it's because of a lot of free time that is not being used. So when we speak about leisure needs, how do we know that people need to be at leisure, right? We can see that through different manifestations. You start seeing people being grumpy, start fighting, or whatever the case may be. But that could be because there's a lack of opportunity for people to play. Just last week here on campus, we had the campus clash, right? So there were different sporting activities happening where most of our students were engaged in a form of physical activity and exercise. And throughout, even all those other students that maybe were not part of the university teams, they were part of something, right? So there was an opportunity where they could play. There was a lot of adequate space, right? So as a leisure need, it results because there's a lack of opportunity for play, inadequate access to leisure spaces, opportunities for social interaction, and freedom of choice. So as leisure service providers, when they offer leisure, they need to provide opportunities and appropriate skills that just goes beyond fun and games. I mean, at the end of the day, we can all go play, but what are we learning from that play, right? I think we can all agree that through each and every engagement, there's always something that you learn. Either you are conscious of what you're learning or you're unconscious of what you're learning, but there's always a certain skill that you derive from the activity that you engage in. So what Caldwell here is saying is that it shouldn't just be about fun and games. Sometimes there needs to be a certain skill that is being learned from these games. And rightfully so. Like, say, for example, if you are a student and you engage in a game of chess, that's more strategy, right? So at the end of the game, what you need to reflect on is how do you use those strategies for defeating your opponent into your own real life situation. For example, one could use a game of chess as a way of planning their study table, their study schedule. Or also they could also use it in a form of, just prioritizing things to make sure that they get things moving. So there's also a quite big misunderstanding that is reported by Caldwell that says that um, beyond fun and games, there's an element of delivery and effectiveness, which is relevant to just fun activities. So, in other words, it's not only the responsibility of you as a participant to learn, but then the service providers that are involved. What role do they play in making sure that you learn beyond just the games and the fun that you're having? So there's different stakeholders that are involved. So I'm going to try to tie it in with the family context. I do apologize about what's being projected there. Hopefully we'll get it right. So when we speak about the family context, and I'm going to speak about the family systems theory. And trust me, this is something that I learned this year while I was studying as well. So I come from a sports background, so I needed to understand the more family dynamics. Hence, I enrolled for the postgrad diploma. So when you look at the family systems theory, it speaks about understanding the family as a unit and not just an individual. So for you to know Makaya, you need to understand Makaya's family context. You need to understand from what context my parents, my siblings, my daughter, wife, you need to understand the entire package so that you get a holistic picture of who I am, right? That's pretty much what the family systems theory tries to advocate. So it speaks about, it's a nice framework of reference to look at a human behavior, and we're shifting this from an individual to the interconnectedness of the family relationship. So my behavior, is it something that is influenced by my upbringing, or is it something that was learned through my interaction with my siblings and so forth? Hence, we look at the family as a unit and not focusing just on the individual. So it looks at how each member is interdependent and is being influenced by another's thoughts, feelings, behavior, and the reciprocal manner as well. I'll make a typical example. I'm sure you guys know or you've come across twins, right? So normally in a family that has twins, you'd always find that they always try to do things identical things. This could either be identical twins or, not identical twins. But there's always, also even with the families, the older sibling would be try to pass on some wisdom to the upcoming siblings as well. So the dynamics are quite different. But if you look at the context of the twins, it's always that influence from the one to the other one. If the other one says, no, today I'm rocking my Nike sneakers, the other one would also try to rock something similar as well. So that's just how it is. Also with siblings also. If the older brother portrays a particular behavior, the likelihood of the youngest sibling following in the same footsteps are quite high. So this theory also tries to look at that, how the thoughts, feelings, and behavior are being passed on from one member to the other. It also proposes to understand a human being, that one needs to understand their family life and relationship within a family. So if we look at, for example, um, your role in the family, how does it speak to your relationship with the parents, your siblings, but over and beyond that, the extended families as well? Um, I'll make an example about me. So I'm married, I still have my parents, I still have my sibling. How I interact with my parents, my wife, and my daughter, that ecosystem on its own, it's something that, one needs to understand how the two interlink with each other. So it focuses on recurring patterns of interactions and communication within a family unit so that one can gain an understanding of an individual's functioning and relational dynamics as well. So it also proposes that throughout one's life journey, there's always contact within a family. As an individual, as grown as I am, I still have contact with my parents, I still have contact with my sibling. That's a lifelong contact that's going to remain, right? But also at the same time, I'm an individual myself, I've got my own family. But that connectedness still applies. And often in times you find some parents that are not easily wanting to let go of their parents, that call in the morning, hey, did you have breakfast? Did you eat? Those kind of things. So it shows that the contact also can be extended to daily activities, just to check up on you and life and how you're progressing and so forth. So um, it is anticipated that a family unit across a lifespan, they also contribute towards the support system of one member within the family. For example, during your own graduation, you're going to have your parents coming through, you're going to have your siblings, you're going to have that uncle that you saw. There's always one uncle in the family member that will come after once in a while, and then they'll come and remind you, remember that day when you were still young? So it's that support system that exists within the family system theory, where it tries to highlight that, to show that there's different levels of support that exist in the family structure as well. So understanding this context of the family as a unit and how it interacts with each other, you'll now get to understand the leisure education part, which I'll speak about in the next slide. So when we speak about leisure education, maybe let me come to this slide first. When we speak about leisure education, it's a tool that uses leisure activities, which offers information and knowledge, and it advances the prospects of future involvement in free time activities for all people. So through leisure education, there's certain components where one can learn about, what to do during your free time, what resources are available, how to interact, the skill level required. Do I require any skill to, be part of a leisure activity or not? So if we look at education, particularly in the context of my talk here, we're looking at it from three lenses. Education for leisure, meaning now you start, if there's a family member with disability, there needs to be that understanding to inform them about leisure activities for the entire family. Remember, we just spoke about the connectedness of the family. So now, if you inform the entire family about leisure activities, the ons and responsibility doesn't just fall on that individual member with a disability, but now everyone is aware of what leisure activities are there, what information is accessible, and so forth. And then we move on to education about leisure. Now you start informing them. Leisure is A, B, and C. Why should you participate in leisure? Because of A, B, and C as an outcome. But not only that, for your own self, the level of renewal and the enjoyment that you get from being in a leisure activity. And also, during the activity, you can educate them through leisure. While the leisure activity is taking place, there's certain skills that people develop. You educate them through leisure. Okay. So there's now a need to raise more awareness, particularly on people, particularly people with disabilities, so that they realize the need for leisure. Remember, I spoke earlier on when I started speaking about if there's no opportunity for play, people with disability might end up in their homes, sleeping the whole time because there's no information about what leisure activities exist in their communities. And we need to start raising more awareness to say that, hey, it's not the end of the world. Disability, there's life after disability. What sort of activities can you come in? And hence the education part of leisure. But also, there's also a focus in terms of the goal of developing people's potential and facilitating participation so that there's personal growth during engagement. So through all in all, and I spoke about the leadership component of my research, so that at the end, you are not the gatekeeper that people must, everything must center around you, but you must instill, skills and, people must also be independent from your services. People must take initiative, and through that promotion of personal growth, it's that now you're giving them the autonomy to also take on the initiatives. Because why? You inform them about what leisure options are available, what can they do, where to go, and access information. So when we speak about the leisure education, and John Datilo is one of the pioneers, along with other scholars such as Atara Sivan, who have been advocating for leisure education, because there's an element of quality of life through engagement, and also during a leisure education program, if it's being tailored or if it's being offered, there needs to be specific intention. What are you offering the program for? It's similar to going to a dentist. You can't just go to a dentist and then they plug out your teeth, right? There needs to be an assessment. So similarly as well, there needs to be outcomes that are feasible. What are you trying to achieve with your leisure education program? Are you raising awareness? Are you sharing information about the leisure activities, leisure spaces? Are people developing skills through your program? So there needs to be measurable and specific outcomes of your program. So when we look at the role of leisure education, right, like I said earlier on, it uses, is a tool that uses leisure activities, which offers information and knowledge. When it comes to the programs, it normally involves structured activities such as, for example, sport, recreation, community engagement. Excuse me. And it can also be tailored to empower people with disabilities. So in as much as we know that the sport has the ability to unite people, we can use sports programs as part of a leisure education to raise more awareness, unity, and social cohesion as well. So there's a lot of capacities such as leadership, which is one of the elements for my research that I'm focusing on. To build leadership capacities, through how do you get someone to become a leader? You give them the space and opportunity to try out their leadership potentials. So through leisure education programs, you can have people with disabilities assuming roles of leaders so that they know how to facilitate a group, how to lead in an activity, so that they can also mobilize other peers to be part of a united society. So it serves a multi-purpose, which includes promoting outdoor activities, sports, facilitating fun and enjoyable learning experiences, and it includes interpersonal social activities. So the focus on leisure education, it's on goal development so that people can realize their potential. And this can go into personal growth as well. So when you're sharing information, it's so that people can feel, okay, I can also take on this role. I know now where to access information. And as a first year, a typical example, for you to now frequent the library, there needs to be information that's shared to say, hey, we've got a library, this is how you go about navigating the library. And similarly with other things as well. If you didn't know about the financial office, then information needs to be shared with you so that you know where to access the financial office. So in a leisure education program, there's these 3 A's that are quite important, which includes accessibility. We know that in South African context, particularly, there's a lot of problem when it comes to access to leisure and recreation spaces. And I'll make a typical, or rather, it might be a silly example. In a stadium, for example, do you see how steep it is to get into a stadium? Imagine someone with using a wheelchair, gaining access into a stadium. Imagine the hassle they have to go through. Again, imagine someone with a disability wanting to travel somewhere using an airplane. Can you just imagine the admin that goes into getting there firstly, disembarking, the whole process of getting their luggages and so forth. So accessibility is a big problem, and it's even more, in my opinion, prevalent in sports and recreation facilities because it's not being thought of during the design. It's an afterthought. Oh, we've got a person with disability. Now there's a rush to get, wheelchair ramps, and they even forget about the walking rails because everything was done as an afterthought. So the second one is the accommodation part of things. People with disabilities are often neglected in society because they are not being accommodated. Something quite interesting when I was doing my previous project, and I spoke to one gentleman with, he had a physical disability. He said to me, look, for me, I can do anything that an able person can do. But then it's about how do we offer the platform and space for them to, to be able to do that activity. And he made a joke and said, I can run as well, you can run. It's about how do we accommodate that person to be able to run, right? And then the last A would be the adaptation. If we are having leisure and recreation programs, how do we adapt our resources? How do we adapt the equipment to make sure that they have the same opportunities that we have, instead of trying to make something special segregated for them, to say this activity here is for people with disabilities. But as part of the main activities, how do we adapt our facilities and environment to cater to persons with disabilities? Hence the whole element of inclusion, equity, and diversity comes in. So John Detillo is proposing in his book a leisure education service delivery model, where he looks at the different components of what needs to be taken into consideration. And he's got papers that are published on using leisure education for social justice, where now it's no longer just about program delivery, but it's about the impact of leisure programs in real time, And he speaks about here the goals, the principles, the components, and the systematic approach. So at each layer, he breaks down all of these components to make sure that program planning is being thought of thoroughly instead of just a blanket approach. But at the baseline of any leisure education program, it's what's this? The pleasant enjoyment experience, the blessings, the reciprocity, the continued pursuit, either through casual or serious leisure. So I know I said quite a lot of things and it might not make sense, but just to summarize what I was speaking about, we need to be considerate of people with disabilities, mainly because they are marginalized already in society. So as family members, as they say, charity begins at home, right? So we need to be considerate of them, their leisure time, their leisure activities, so that they also feel part and parcel of a society before they go out in society, right? And it's not feasible to expect someone else, a leisure service provider, to satisfy the leisure needs of a person with disability if they are not aware of what it entails to be disabled, right? So more awareness about disability. And it's a pity that Disability Month is being celebrated, like just a small event, then it's a tick box exercise. But there needs to be more awareness about disability and the impact that it has not only on an individual, but on society, on households, and on the individual themselves. So we had one of our honor students 2-3 years back. We gave them a wheelchair and said, look, you need to experience how a person with disability navigates our campus. And we said to them, here's a wheelchair. Just try navigating yourself around campus and imagine the experiences. Now you're not being told, you're going to experience that as well. And when they came back, the feedback that they gave us, it was shocking because some of the spaces they couldn't access, some of the, even like the entire campus, it's ignorant to a person with disability. Some of them even came back and said, I was almost knocked over by a vehicle because people have no regard for a person with disability. So, I even lost my train of thought. So, by simply just encouraging a person with disability or without a disability, it requires not only the policies, but the practice needs to be impactful. We all know in South Africa we've got many beautiful policies out there, but then are they implementable? Are they actionable to make an impact in society? And a simple response would be no, they're not, right? So we need to now start translating those policies into implementable actions so that there is an impact in society and on people's life as well. There's also limited programs and opportunities. This could also be, if we look at, for example, adapting an equipment. There's a lot of cost implications, so there's that to consider as well. In as much as I spoke about the 3 A's, but then there's other implications as well. There's costs and affordability of equipment that must be considered as well. So it's not as easy as speaking about it. There's other things that needs to be considered. But one thing for sure, it is doable. It's just a matter of how do we get there. So in conclusion, I spoke about the policies and legislations in South Africa and how they don't necessarily offer much to a person with disability. And I welcome any criticism on this. But from my assessment, It doesn't offer an opportunity for empowerment and to develop the person with disability. It's there theoretically, but the actionable part, it's what is missing. So what I've also noticed is that youth, they appear to be victims of these policies. And also for social ills. I've got a very good friend of mine that was, he got caught up in the crossfire, unfortunately. And he's now living with a disability because of the social ills in society. So there's also that as well. So there's the social ills that could impact people and young people particularly because of what is happening through our policies and the social ills. And also the policies for youth in South Africa, such as the National Youth Policy, the National Disability Policy Rights, those needs to be more translated into actionable and feasible strategies with an impact. As I said, the implementation, it always remains a problem, which results in people being marginalized and creating an uncomfortable environment. So yeah, that's my talk for today. Thank you so much. I had a, oh, now it's working. So, so if you want to connect with me, I'm on LinkedIn and ResearchGate, and my email address is right there as well. And also just to acknowledge some of the references that I used in this presentation. Yes. Do we do Q&As or any questions? No. No question.
I was just thinking maybe I'm caring for wheelchair-bound students, so I've been involved in the disability unit working as a student assistant. Do I need this? So was it my second and third year undergrad years, I was working as a student assistant, and then again second year masters, I think, or first year masters, and now I'm currently, it's my last actually caring for this wheelchair-bound student who has spinal bifida. So she has the luggy because she has they're still waiting on NSFAS for the electronic wheelchair. But I remember we were at the center and she had a fall. I got a call that she fell because of the bumpy. I mean, this, as you said, that this was an afterthought. So I'm also just thinking, you know, the learned behavior and then modeling of behavior. So back in the day with the struggle, it's majority rules, or when there's a vote, it's majority rules. So they are the minority. So I always also speak, we have a beautiful constitution, beautiful policies, but it's not being implemented. But at the end of the day, also in the leisure education, that guys, the something and the S1, I see them, first time I hear about them. So I love that, leisure education. But then you find in communities where unemployment, the high unemployment rate, what kind of role models are we setting? Because the type, they're living a life of leisure, because they're sitting on corners, they're sitting and just doing, that's their, but I mean, it's also a change in a shift in the mindsets of people. So where do you start? Because charity does begin at home, but it also starts with the individual. But who are suffering at the end of the day? It's our kids, because they deserve a life. So we need to do more. So well done. I can speak all day, but let me stop this. Thanks so much, Tom. Really amazing.
No other comments or questions? Okay. Thank you so much.
Be differently able,
Yeah.
and then the able. But then you find that the differently able, they struggle. It's more of a struggle for them. And yet, my friend used to always say, we all have a disability. We just haven't been diagnosed. And I'm just thinking with this girl, my student, she comes from a community, social ills, everything you can think about. It's present there. But now the thing is this again, had she not had the good role models, because her sister's at Stellenbosch, she's so consistent in terms of her schoolwork and focused. But had it not been for that role models, good positive role models, where would she have been today?
Yeah.
You understand? So they
Yeah.
need support. And we can't always blame the government, that's it. We need to everybody.
Yeah. So it's quite interesting because reason why I'm incorporating the leadership part is that there needs to be less reliance on government. We always hear government is not doing A, B, and C, but what initiatives are we coming up with to be less reliant on them?
I like what you said about going out to school. So these youngsters, or whichever, the mature students, they need to be equipped to become speakers. Go out and do and advocate for your for what you Thank you so much.
Thank you.